welcome back. We don't have much left here. We have the last media member standing. We'll give you the update on that all-important event here in a minute. We are really excited about Chris Finebaum joining us from The Athletic. Chris, thank you. We've had many conversations with you. We were talking off the air. Only 6 media members remaining, by the way.
There is one. My colleague Sam Kahn at The Athletic. He's not in his chair, but I have seen him. So
if we go up,
he says he doesn't want to be last, but I kind of hope he is.
So he might be. We have an invasion now. These are student athletes, I believe. That I don't know what these are, but it really doesn't matter.
It's local kids,
because we're talking to you. This is a week that pretty much happens every year, and we all go, "Oh, not a lot happened there," but that's not really the purpose of it.
No, the purpose is to promote the league and everything that's going. I was talking with people in the conference. I was like, there hasn't really been anything newsy, nothing that jumped out here, and they were like, that's great. That's how they want it to be. They don't want to they don't want to have Mike Gundy saying what he said last week and stuff like that. So it was a good week for the SEC. Mixed depending on if you're median, depending on what exactly you're looking for here, but it's good to see people always before the season. It kind of feels like the real kickoff to things, and the Texas-Oklahoma aspect obviously kind of hung over everything.
You are at the vanguard of national writers who talk big pictures and dig and drill deep. When you come to something like this, you're listening, but what are you doing as the week goes on? What are you thinking about? Because there's just most of the conversation is fairly benign, isn't it?
Yeah. Like someone like me, I'm trying to find people off to the side when you can. Ask them about certain things that may be upcoming, less about what do you think about Texas and Oklahoma coming into the league. And so you can get bits and pieces here and there. Every conference runs their media days a little bit different. They really kind of lock things down here at the SEC, make it a little bit tougher. And sometimes you don't have a coach who's a character who will say something dramatic. Sometimes the SEC will get that. Sometimes a coach will say something controversial, and you've got a week's worth of content out of that. We haven't had that this week, but, I think, the expanded playoff is here. The House settlement is close to being done. A lot of these big things, realignment happened. So, a lot of these big things that have dominated the conversation have kind of stopped for the time being. We'll see if something else happens in the near future, but it's a bit of a pause right now.
I've heard probably as much just in the hallways about Florida State and Clemson this week as I have about anything else. So on that subject, we asked the commissioner, as others have. He was certainly prepared for the question, but what do you think?
Well, there's nothing he can say or the Big Ten or anybody can say because Florida State and Clemson are locked into the ACC until 2036.
Right.
And nobody wants a tortious interference lawsuit on their hands. So no one's going to say a word about what they think about that. And until Florida State and Clemson announce some sort of action, even that's only going to start a process. They've been in a legal fight for more than 6 months at this point. It doesn't appear to have a resolution coming anytime soon unless they settle, which seems unlikely at the moment. So we're kind of to see if Florida State and Clemson break that wall down, and what happens there, nobody's quite sure yet. I don't even know if they're sure yet.
Yeah, we put up a headline here. This may, I would think there's significance here because ESPN is in the middle of the conversation because they do the ACC games. What do you think they're going to learn once they get these documents?
Not much, because they will be redacted. All the trade secrets, all the confidential information will be redacted. And actually, the ACC had already agreed to turn over pretty much the same information to the Florida State last week. A judge agreed on in order to do that. And trade secrets cannot come out in legal proceedings. So all of ESPN's secrets and everything that comes along with that TV deal are not going to be made public. But the Big Ten, the SEC, the Big 12, they all filed briefs in support of the ACC's case in this situation. So we might have some interesting language of how things work, but we're not going to find out specifics, that juicy things I'm sure a lot of us would like to know.
Everybody's got an opinion on the Big 12. It's a good conference, very active commissioner. I haven't run into many people, Chris, who think it's realistic that FSU and Clemson would end up there. They would certainly be able to dictate the terms, but where are you on that possibly happening?
Again, it's impossible to predict what happens if Florida State and Clemson do something, does the rest of the ACC stay together? Do things fall apart? We don't know. It's different than the Pac-12 because the Pac-12's television deal was coming up.
Right.
There was a deadline to figure things out. The ACC has that ESPN option that comes up at the beginning of next year.
That's a big moment, though, isn't it?
Perhaps that could turn into something. And if you're Florida State and Clemson, you want to kind of create some chaos and hope something can come out of that. But the Big 12 and the ACC are otherwise on equal footing right now. They make pretty much the same amount of money per school. They both like to say they're the number 3 conference in college football, which is fair to do. But I think if you're the Big 12, you're more, Florida State and Clemson, they want to get to the Big 10 SEC where there's going to be more money. There's not going to be as much more money with the Big 12. I think the Big 12, if you're thinking, if the ACC falls apart somehow, like the Pac-12 did, are there teams in that second tier that perhaps could fit? But again, a lot of this is dictated by the television broadcast companies who have the money to pay for this. And nobody wants to add a school if it's going to dilute the payments. It all has to bring more value.
And I know this is old news here, but that was really one reason that CBS got knocked out of the SEC world, because they did not adjust when Missouri and Texas A&M came in 11 or 12 years ago.
Right. And Greg Sankey has said it multiple times here today. We're not going to dilute our pie. That's why Oregon and Washington are going to the Big Ten, because Fox paid up more, but not so much more. They're going to be at like 50% share until the next television deal. They're not going to be making much more money than they were in the Pac-12, but they will down the road is the hope. SMU's not taking any television money for almost a decade. Stanford and Cal are much lower shares in the ACC. So, there's not unlimited money from ESPN and Fox and the like to throw around. And so that's why Florida State and Clemson feel like this may be their last chance to get into one of those conferences and whatever comes up in the future.
You hear the SEC people, the insiders, say, well, we don't like the way they handled everything, especially Florida State. I mean, Clemson really hasn't made a lot of noise, a little bit, but not much. If it comes down to it, and again, I'm just hypothesizing that somebody comes up with some ingenious legal theory that we've never seen before, and that they were available. Is the SEC's primary interest, in your mind, in Florida State and Clemson only to keep them from going to the Big Ten?
Well, that's part of what you have to consider. How much of it is defensive? You're not adding more SEC network homes in those states, and I'm sure Florida and South Carolina wouldn't love that either. But if the Big Ten's already at 18 and they're looking at 20, that's the question. And if the grant of rights were to somehow get nullified in court, and that opens up everybody, North Carolina is the real gem here for both conferences. Neither of them are in North Carolina. It's a very prestigious, giant public school, the flagship school in that state. That is where a lot of the real value is. Okay. And so if the door is completely open, then we don't know really where it goes.
And it is not a trade secret, because you never know where one person says something, but it just becomes part of the narrative. But several people said today, as you know, that Virginia might be the perfect person, and I understand it, because presidents sit in these rooms and they value a school like the University of Virginia. It's hard to explain to an audience like this program, though. Like, why would you want Virginia?
Well, look at the Big Ten. They added UCLA with USC. It wasn't Oregon. Right. It wasn't the best football or otherwise athletic program out there. There's different factors that play in all of that. But the Big Ten got all of Southern California and kind of took that base. Virginia is probably the number 1, number 2 public college in this country. It's very prestigious. Yeah. Thomas Jefferson.
Don't tell Michigan fans that.
Well, they're right there, Michigan and Virginia, right there. And so you talk about AAU status. That still matters to Big Ten presidents who make these decisions. Florida State's not there yet. Miami is. North Carolina, Virginia. So, there's a lot of factors that go into these things. Every time we go through realignment, it's a little bit different. And if, again, North Carolina, Virginia, both of those conferences would love to have them. They can't say that publicly, obviously, but that's a value there. And
that's always the disconnect. And I wanted you to explain that, because Chris and I don't make those decisions. Whether I like Florida State or Clemson,
If it was up to me, I'd bring the Southwest Conference back. We're here in Dallas,
I would like to see the Pony Express play again, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
But it's not about the matchups. Although I wonder, though, with the television networks playing such a big role, why isn't it about the matchups? Because if you're scheduling a game on a Saturday night for whatever network, Florida State and Michigan or Clemson and Ohio State, or just fill in your blank on the SEC sounds a whole lot better than Virginia and North Carolina.
Well, I think the biggest, not shocker, but one of the biggest, strangest realignment moves when you look back in history was the Big Ten adding Rutgers and Maryland. And that's not USC, Oregon, Oklahoma, Texas. But what it did was it got the Big Ten network into those states, into those giant markets, and there was a huge influx of cash into the Big Ten. And if you're the Big Ten, you look back at those moves as a success because the Big Ten network and the television money became so much bigger because they added those two schools. So Jim Delaney's move there ended up working out. And so those are the kinds of things
that was a century ago in terms of what happens in television, as you well know.
But with the SEC network, with the Big Ten network, the different fees that come along with that, at a time, by the way, when linear television subscribers are declining. And so that's why it comes back to ESPN and Fox. They don't have unlimited money to spread out. We just saw TNT is losing the NBA for the first time in 40 years or whatever it is. So that's, again, why Florida State and Clemson feel like that TV bubble may burst at some point, and they don't want to be left behind in a conference that doesn't have enough money because those large TV deals may not be the same as they were.
I'll never forget about 10 years ago, right after that happened, I landed at LaGuardia and was walking, and all of a sudden it said, home of the Big Ten. I'm like going, who's in the Big Ten in New York?
In the AD who put that together, Tim Pernetti, is now the commissioner of the American Athletic Conference.
Exactly.
So he went off into the business world and came back and did some things. So things change all the time.
Yeah, no doubt. Well, this was fun. We've talked to you so many times, but to be able to sit here with you.
I've seen The Last Day so many times on television. This is my first time actually being here. So to be the last guest on the show and get to watch who's going to be last.
If you went out there and sat, you might be the last media member too, but I know that's probably not high on your list. Thank you very much.
Probably not.
Great to see you, Chris. Chris Finebaum joining us from the Athletic. We'll take a break, and then the world-famous last media member. There's 9, so obviously somebody must be watching
Sam
somewhere.
Came back, my buddy Sam, for the Athletic.
Sam Kahn, right now, among the favorites, because he's the only one out there we know.